I'm Samantha Figueroa, and me and my partner chose Greta Gerwig as our director. And we watched her movies Little Women and Barbie. I chose Greta Gerwig because she's very talented at making certain topics more available to the public. For example, she used Barbie to inspire conversations about society's perception, treatment, and expectations on women versus men. I truly enjoy the way she manages to integrate morals or ideas into her works, because she does so in a way that's subtle, but it still sticks with you. In that, I mean that it's subtle so you can still enjoy the plot and the humor of the movie, but the moral or the idea that she's trying to share is still very prominent. Her works Little Women and Barbie were both centered around the female experience. Specifically, they focused on the societal differences between women and men, and the way that women are often limited by gender. The main attribute that stuck with me from her films was the way that she uses color. In Little Women, Gerwig moves between past and present to tell the story. To indicate that they're in the past, she uses brighter color gradings and warmer colors. To suggest that they're in the present, she uses a cooler color grading, utilizing blues and grays. In Little Women, she also uses the color of the film to show the emotions of the characters. For example, in the beginning of the film, when they're in the past, it's always brighter colors to show how happy they are to be all together when Beth is still alive. And then during the beginning of the movie, but when they're in the present, using the cooler colors, it's very cold. But then as you move on, and they're still in the present time, but they're now later on in the film, the cooler colors are slowly starting to get warmer to show how they're healing after Beth's death. So then in Barbie, she uses pink and other bright colors to make it obvious that they're in Barbie land, contrasting the more serious, untreated colors that represent the real world. Another element that characterizes her films is the focus that she puts on female characters. Moreover, the message in the films is one that often suggests that one woman's walk of life isn't inferior at all to another's, regardless of whether it's more feminine or masculine. She does this in Little Women and Barbie. In Little Women, she focuses on exploring the very different lives of the four sisters. While doing this, she doesn't condemn any sister for the life they chose, whether it's to stay at home to be a mother, or to be an artist, or to be a writer, which was at the time a more male-dominated job. On the other hand, male characters are mainly treated as love interests, and they don't have much character development or relevance to the film outside of their connection to the sisters. This is similar to Barbie, in which the main message of the film is presented through Barbie as opposed to the male characters. In fact, although some of the men change as the film goes on, they are mainly used to provide comedic relief. Another interesting observation that I had was about the clothing that the characters wear. Gerwig utilizes clothing to argue against the idea that a woman must be more masculine to be a strong woman or to be taken seriously. In the end of Barbie, when Barbie makes the hard choice to stay in the real world, she does so while wearing a soft yellow flowing dress. She did not have to abandon her femininity to venture into the real world and become a real woman or real person. In Little Women, the film begins with Jo wearing pants as she nervously enters the publisher's office to sell her story. By the end of the movie, she has had her book published and is now wearing a soft pink dress. And then one interesting thing about the way that she films is her shots. In her ending and most emotional scenes, Gerwig also tips her hat at specific shots that characterizes her films. Many times, instead of having characters outright say something to express their feelings or their thoughts, she simply focuses a still shot on the character's face and has the character transition between their feelings. In Little Women, Gerwig focuses on the expressions of elation, worry, and contentment that Jo experiences as she watches her book be published. And this reflects the joy of having her book published, the worry that she has about her book's future, and finally, the pride that she has at all she achieved. In Barbie, the camera is often focused on Margot Robbie's expressions as she learns about the beauty of the real world. Again, this trend of focusing on a character's face while music swells in the background is an attribute that is first shown in Gerwig's first directed film, Lady Bird. In Lady Bird, this is done when Marion, the main character's mom, decides to go back and say farewell to her daughter who is leaving for college. If Gerwig were to direct Hamlet, I think she would choose to do so in a more modern universe. And the reason I think this is because of the way that she chose to bring Barbie into the real world, like quite literally. She could have chosen to have all this stuff, to show all this in the Barbie world, but instead she chose to take it into the real world. Also with Little Woman, she did change part of the ending of the story because she wanted to make it more relatable to the audience. Also, when she was talking about how determined she was to direct Little Woman, she was saying that she wanted to revive the story, so it wasn't just for your grandmother to read, like an old story. She wanted to make it more reachable for younger audiences. And I think the way to do that with Hamlet, a very old story, would be to take it into the modern age. Next, I think Gerwig would incorporate lots of humor throughout the film, but not so much that it becomes intrusive. I also think she would use a lot of vivid color throughout the film to portray the emotions that the characters are having. She might also go back and forth between color grading and time periods as well, and also use backflashes. I think she would also choose to focus more attention on Ophelia because she's truly a fascinating character, even though she's often portrayed as foolish or easily swayed. Something that I noticed about Gerwig is that she often uses wide shots and steady tracking shots. For example, in Little Woman, at the very beginning when Jo's running through the streets, it's a very steady shot, a steady wide shot that follows her as she runs. And something that she also does is while there's a lot of action happening, like a lot of movement when she's running, Gerwig suddenly puts the camera into slow motion and then goes back right into normal speed. So that's something I found interesting that I might like to do with Hamlet. Yeah, and then for Hamlet, I plan to do Act 2, Scene 1, where Ophelia is just running down to tell her father that Hamlet was, that he randomly came in and started shaking her and that he was scaring her. So for this scene, I plan on using distinct costume changes to illustrate the headspace that the characters are in. So, for example, really ragged, messy clothes for Hamlet because he's trying to act crazy, and then bright colors when Ophelia's before the confrontation, and then darker colors after her father sort of blames her for Hamlet's actions. And I would also like to have several shots, close-up shots that focus only on the characters' faces as they transition between emotions and music plays in the background. As I said before, I think I'll also focus the play on Ophelia instead of Hamlet because she's really an interesting character. She's often just dismissed as a woman in Hamlet's eyes. Something that I also noticed in Gerwig is that she often focuses on internal conflicts within her characters. For example, Barbie deciding whether to stay in the real world or to go back, and Jo deciding whether or not she wants to marry. In my short film, I can focus on Ophelia battling between whether she should or shouldn't listen to her father. And I can probably do this by focusing a still-centered shot on Ophelia's face and have the conflict war between her. I think my short film will also focus on the theme of mistreatment and misogyny that is ever present throughout the play. It focuses on how Ophelia is put in a place where she's both scared of men but also held responsible for their bad actions. In this way, it provides a look at Hamlet's less heroic side, and it can also switch the perspective to see him not as a man who is trying to do right for his father, but as a man who causes a woman fear because of his sudden and rash actions. And so, those are my thoughts.